Thank you for being present here today. Present. This was and is Ethel Cameron, with others, in their joys, in their pains, in life. And now is the time for you and I to be present with Glenn and Nancy and their family. And you may have noticed as you gathered in here today that there was no reserved seating for Ethel's family. This was truly by design. All her life, Ethel was among people, with them, sharing in life. And today I invite you to be with her family, sharing in this time of reflection. In recent years, an author that Ethel had been reading was Henry Nouwen, a Dutch priest. But more than a priest, Henry was human, present in his surroundings, observing, listening, writing, and being changed. The following writing is his, and I truly believe it paints a beautiful picture of Ethel's walk, talk, and living among you and me. Your suffering is my suffering, by Henry Nouwen. Compassion means to become close to the one who suffers. But we can come close to another person only when we are willing to become vulnerable ourselves. A compassionate person says, I am your brother. I am your sister. I am human, fragile, and mortal, just like you. I am not scandalized by your tears, nor afraid of your pain. I too have wept. I too have felt pain. We can be with the other only when the other ceases to be other and becomes like us. This, perhaps, is the main reason that we sometimes find it easier to show pity than compassion. The suffering person calls us to become aware of our own suffering. How can I respond to someone's loneliness unless I am in touch with my own experience of loneliness? How can I become close to handicapped people when I refuse to acknowledge my own handicaps? How can I be with the poor when I am unwilling to confess my own poverty? And now we come to the one who became suffering for us and joins us in our suffering. Would you pray with me? Jesus, we pause in these moments to simply come before you, and yes, very much aware of your suffering for us. Today it is your presence that we very much welcome here in this place. Be near Glenn, be near Nancy and their families today and in the days to come. And through what is expressed here today, may we all be mindful of the invitation that you give to each of us. The invitation of suffering, to enter into that space, to walk with others, to be present. God, as we pause, as we remember Ethel as she walked among us for 90 years, it is that care, it is that compassion that we recall just now. An eternal one, it is that care, it is that compassion that we ask today would take us into the days ahead. May your Spirit speak today. We ask this in your name, the one who suffered. Amen. The song that we're going to view on the screen and listen to in just a few moments it's a hymn that Ethel treasured. And this particular rendition she watched from her home over the Christmas holidays. It's a rendition of the Salvation Army. And as she viewed and heard these voices and instruments, her face beamed with light.
Oh, fullness of
going to invite Glenn to come and share some remarks on behalf of the family. Glenn?
Chris, we didn't plan that very well. That song brings up a lot of emotions, and I'm going to have a hard enough time getting through this as it is. I sat with Mom so many times in the last few months, and I've watched that video with her. It's a special song. On behalf of Nancy and myself and our family, I want to thank you for joining us today in the celebration of life for our mother, Ethel Cameron. The truth is, the service almost didn't happen. Mom began talking about her service not long after Dad passed. She wanted me to know, and she had a very detailed service in mind. Whether it was the pandemic or what may have stirred her the last few years, her wishes changed, and she told me that she just wanted to have a simple family-only service on the shores of the Nashwaaksis River, which is where she grew up. It's a place that she walked along the Nashwaaksis Trail with my dad over and over and over. I can't tell you how many times they walked along the Nashwaaksis River. And as a child, I'm sure she played near it, but if you know Mom, she probably didn't even stick her toe in. And it was my intention to honor her wishes. But here we are today. After her passing, I began to get knocks on the door of her apartment. Phone calls from people, some I knew, some were strangers. And not one of them offered simple condolences. Everybody wanted to take time to share what Mom meant to them. And they all wanted to know when the service was going to be. I guess I answered with a half-truth because I told them I didn't have a date yet. Neglecting to share, of course, that most of them wouldn't be invited. Then came the immovable force, sitting in the back of the church, my sister. I don't remember the conversation that we had, but she insisted, she was adamant that there had to be a service to allow all of the friends and loved ones that Mom had to come and share a time to remember her. And I know Mom's with us today, and she's smiling because she cares so much for everybody that is here and for the others that were not able to join us today. Mom exuded unconditional love and compassion, and I didn't understand the depths of her compassion until after her death. I mean, I knew she cared for people, and Dad often joked that she kept Canada Post in business with all the cards and letters that she would send. So yes, Mom was compassionate. I mean, we all like to think that we're compassionate. Hope you feel better. Thoughts and prayers. So very sorry for your loss. But it's a funny thing, because when you find out where the word compassion comes from, its real origin, it turns out the word means to suffer with. Not to pity or feel sorry for, not to put hugs on somebody's Facebook wall, but to suffer with. Mom was able to suffer with others, to take on their pain and carry it around with her for a while. Someone hurting, someone less fortunate, someone completely lost. Mom's gift to the world, to us all, was compassion. I was with her in those final moments on earth, and she looked at me, not with fear in her eyes, but compassion shone from her eyes. She was worried about me, as Mom would. She was worried about Nancy. She was worried about each of you. That was Mom. And when she reached the other side, I am sure there was a big yellow school bus full of loved ones that met her there. That is our mother. That is the woman we're here to celebrate today. There's a story of a monk who was visiting heaven. An angel was showing him the splendor of heaven before he returned to earth. At one point, they crossed over a bridge that traversed turbulent waters. The monk asked why such tempestuous waters existed in a place like heaven. The angel told him the river is swollen by the tears of lamentation shed by the living for those departed. And the angel said to the monk, "Tell the world upon your return that when you're in the world, make no lamentation and weeping without cause, because it creates difficulty and harms souls of the departed loved ones." And I love this story because the angel doesn't say we shouldn't shed tears or be sad when we lose our loved ones, but he cautions us not to linger there. And as we celebrate our mother, I hope this service brings you peace, for Mom, you want that for each of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. I now would invite Margaret and Anne to come. And as I heard them smiling and chuckling yesterday, to share with you all a piece that I don't know if they can remember the number of times. It was asked by request of Ethel, but may you reflect on those memories as they share with you a favorite piece of Ethel, simply an English country garden. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Anne. And can't you just picture Ethel just sitting there in the chair, just lightly just tapping her foot? I want to share a reading with you today. It comes from Mark's Gospel. It may be a story that is familiar to you. And then I just want to take but just a moment to pull a couple of thoughts out that I think really help us tie together what you've already heard expressed through Glenn's words, through the songs, the music that you've already heard here today. So here is that story from Mark's Gospel. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And then they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried on by foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour now is very late. Send them away so that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. Understanding compassion is to be present. Even more than being present, as Glenn has already shared, it is to suffer with. For many years, Ethel came alongside families in their struggles. Yes, at times to offer a word or two of advice, and maybe a few more to Glenn and Nancy. But this was Ethel's gift and compliment to her husband and their ministry for over 40 years. In Stillman's final weeks of human living, Ethel would display compassion as only a spouse can. Perhaps with her own questions, but in her faith, leaving those questions with the eternal, and simply displaying the gift she had shared with so many before. She would again be the constant presence for Glenn, even at a distance, when Crystal was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Now, why do I mention these difficult times of pain and grief? This is where the love of the eternal is found. Recall the story that I just read from Mark's Gospel, the feeding of a massive crowd. The disciples could only see the situation in front of them. They did not see the presence of God with us. When faced with a situation that appears too big for humanity to handle, it can be, and often is, difficult to see God present, displaying compassion. Jesus gave the disciples a task. He called them to act, to participate in a gift of compassion, to feed those who were hungry. But how, they wondered. Jesus, in his words, was saying, leave that to the eternal. And when they brought the food they had collected, Jesus did what we all must do. when faced with a situation too big for humanity, look up. This is what Ethel did for others. She looked up. When her husband and life partner was struggling, yes, she had her worries, but she looked up. When Crystal was sick, she looked up. But looked up where? To the Father. The same Father Jesus looked up to when he blessed the food. The one who is present in the what-ifs of life. The moments when humanity cannot understand what is going on. This was the compassion Ethel expressed all of her life. And yes, there is coming a day when no heartache shall come. There'll be no sorrow there, no more burdens to bear. What a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see.
There is coming a day when no heartache shall come, no more clouds in the sky, no more tears to dim the eye. All is peace forevermore on that happy golden shore. What a day, glorious day that will be. Sing it if you know it. Oh, what a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see, and I look upon his face, the one who saved me by his grace. When he takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. What a day, glorious day that will be. There'll be no sorrow there, no more burdens to bear, no more sickness, no pain, no more parting over there, and forever I will be with the one who died for me. What a day, glorious day that will be. And what a day that will be when my Jesus I shall see, when I look upon his face, the one who saved me by his grace. And when he takes me by the hand and leads me through the promised land. Oh, what a day, glorious day that will be. What a day, glorious day that will be.
As Glenn has already mentioned, again, I do want to extend a thank you to all of you on behalf of Glenn and Nancy and their families for being present here today. And I encourage you in the days and weeks ahead to continue to remember them in your thoughts and your prayers. And Glenn and Nancy also wish to express their thanks to the people of Nashwaaksis Baptist Church for opening their facility so that we could come together to remember Ethel. Following the close of our time in this space, you are all invited to gather in the lounge and in the foyer for refreshments and continue in a time of reflection with the family. And now I would simply like to invite Ethel's cousin, Dr. Harry Wilson, to come.
Thank you, and if you will forgive me for not walking up on the platform, I'm not as young as I once was, and 3 steps pose a bit of a crisis to me, and I thought if I collapsed here in the middle of the Baptist church, I'd never live it down. I apologize for that. I'm going to pray in just a moment, but he mentioned, the Cochrane clan that I came out of, Ethel came out of, is getting weeded out a little bit. And the first cousin level, the pastor mentioned Ethel was my first cousin, we're down to 3 now. Margaret, wherever she went, over there. Margaret, myself, and Ethel. Now we're down to 2. So there are not many. The theme of this was, I didn't ask if I could talk for a minute. What are you going to do? Hard to throw me out at this juncture. But the theme of this was compassion. My father died when I was 10 years old, was pastoring in what was then called the Barker's Point Wesleyan Church. I'm an only child, which explains my idiosyncratic behavior. I don't know what happened to the rest of you really, but that's what happened to me. And Ethel's parents, my Uncle Chester and Aunt Christian, lived in a brick house up in Marysville. They invited my mother and myself to come and live with them. My father had purchased a home in Marysville to retire in someday, but my mother didn't feel equipped to go into a home with a 10-year-old kid in the middle of New Brunswick winter. So we moved in with Uncle Chester and Aunt Christian and lived there for a couple of years. He became a very important person in my life, but Ethel wasn't married yet. Ethel was single. She got married, I think, Glenn, am I right, in the summer of '56, is that correct? So for about 6 months after my mother and I moved in that house with Uncle Chester, Aunt Christian, and Ethel, Ethel was engaged, soon to be married, but single, working for the provincial government. The space in the house was limited. And so Ethel agreed that my mother, her aunt, more than 20 years her senior, would move into the room with her. And my mother became Ethel's roommate. Bedmate, I think. There was only one bed in there, as I remember. And I never thought much about that until just recently. If you're 20 or 21 or wherever you are, and you're going to invite your old aunt, you're not going to invite her. She's sort of superimposed on you. And your aunt is moving in with you and sharing a room, and sharing a bed, I think, even, without complaint. Without why me? Without why did this have to happen? Because even back then, this compassion thing they've all talked about, there it was, in the flesh, right in front of a 10-year-old kid. So I don't know, sorry to be personal, but I lost my wife this week. She died on Tuesday morning. And I don't know whether Ethel is listening in on this or not. I've been talking to my wife all the time. I can say anything I want, now she can't contradict me. So stuff I've had bottled up for 25 years, there it is, right up there in the open for everybody to see and hear. But, so Ethel, if you're listening, if that's possible, I don't know how that all works. And the people who know how it all works, don't come back to tell us. But if you're listening, thank you for being compassionate to your aunt and your young cousin when we needed that exactly profoundly in our lives. Father dear, I thank you for the joy, really, of remembering someone who knew you and whose faith was vibrant and strong. For the opportunity together for a few minutes today to honor her and to highlight the compassion she had, not just for people that were close kin. It just kind of dripped out of who she was. And I thank you for that. And for this opportunity to be together, I pray for the family. And now when He was able to keep us from falling and to present us faultless before His presence with exceeding joy, to the only wise God our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forevermore.